where, like I mentioned, we have the Shuping will continue our discussion for the next hour and a half with Mr. Eno Schmidt in the other classroom for 270-101. And in this room, we will invite Mr. Yamamori, Toru Yamamori of Osaka University in Japan. He has provided a video, and he will Skype with us after the video presentation. He'll talk about what can we learn from a grassroots feminist UBI movement.
那我在这间教室即将演讲的主题是：我们可以从全球无条件基本收入推广总协调的行动知道什么？由京都同济社大学经济教授 Toru Yamamori 演说的简报影片。
So we will begin with the presentation.
There was a grassroots feminist movement that demanded an unconditional basic income in 1970s Britain. The movement had been erased from written history, and no academic literature recorded big fact, either in basic income studies or any other discipline. Three important reasons, among many, why I believe it should not have been excluded from our history are that, first, the movement finally distinguished an UBI from the broader concept of guaranteed income long before academics did. Second, there were earnest discussions concerning the feminist argument for UBI, which academic feminists only started to discuss 2 decades later. Third, the movement succeeded in making basic income an officially endorsed demand of the British women's liberation movement. The academic historiography of UBI has tended to focus on fat thinkers in the ivory tower role. We can learn a lot from this type of historiography, but so, too, I believe, from the history of the basic income movement unfolding outside the ivory tower. With this in mind, I wish to put forth the need for historiography of the basic income movement, showing what we can learn from it with examples from the working class women's struggle in 1970s Britain. While I believe there are a number of potential lessons that can be drawn, given the time constraint, I will focus on one topic, the recent argument on technological progress at the UBI. There was a grassroots feminist movement that demanded an unconditional basic income in 1970s. In Davos in January last year, as the World Economic Forum took place, robots were dancing in the street with a demand for UBI. Inside cartoon box robots, there were activists from the Swiss Initiative for UBI. The message behind this artistic installation is clear. The inevitability of UBI in the age of technological progress, replacing human labor with robot labor. This voice in the street echoed a discussion from inside the forum building. A Silicon Valley entrepreneur and a Nobel Prize-winning economist expressed their support for UBI at the session entitled World Without Work, one of the debate sessions of the World Economic Forum at Davos on 20th January 2016. Derek George, an AI researcher and the Silicon Valley entrepreneur, explained that UBI is becoming possible, as cited in this study. In Davos in January last year, and Sir Christopher Sarides, a Nobel laureate and professor at LSE, added that it is not only possible but also necessary, as cited in this slide. Sir Christopher Sarides, a Nobel laureate. This line of reasoning for UBI is garnering popularity with AI and singularity argument. However, this line of reasoning for UBI is garnering popularity with AI and singularity However, it isn't a new argument. For example, some have argued for UBI with similar reasons since the late 1960s. Roughly speaking, these arguments can be charted as: first, technological progress makes a society wealthier, such that the economic problem of poverty gets solved. Second, technological progress significantly reduces the number of jobs. Third, while the first renders UBI positive, the second renders it inevitable. Let me name this rationale as the technological unemployment case for UBI. The prophecy on the first and second part of this case was categorically given by one of the most influential economists in the last century, John Maynard Keynes. Before uncritically endorsing the case, let us examine Keynes' prophecy and whether it's sound. I don't have time to read this section. Let me just point out the line. According to Keynes, by 2030, technological progress eliminates almost jobs, so that there would not be enough jobs for all. We are all entrapped to what he called pseudo-moral principles, which mean love for money and for being busy for possessing it. In the short run, we need work sharing in order to avoid going mad. And in the long run, we should discard the capitalist moral principle. We are nearly Keynes' grandchildren, with some 13 years to go to 2030. We are, therefore, in a good position to evaluate his prophecy. It seems almost correct on economic growth and technological progress. However, it does not appear to be correct as concerns working hours, the change of moral code, and of distribution. In 2008, a book came out in which 18 leading economists debate the question as to why such a talented economist made, at least partially, wrong prophecy. I shall not repeat their reasoning here. Instead, I'd like to learn from our history of basic income. A past feminist UBI movement will tell us some reasons why Keynes went wrong. Reasons which all of these 18 economists, who happen to be old men, don't even mention. I don't have time to... Again, I don't have time to read this section. A resolution on UBI was passed with a majority vote at the National Women's Liberation Conference in 1977. The resolution was raised by working class women in the Claimant Union movement. The Claimant Union is a union by and of and for welfare benefit claimants. Since its beginning, more than half of members of Claimant Union were women, and the majority of long-standing active members were women as well. Women vis-à-vis men disproportionately faced harassment by welfare officers. These women were suffering from so-called cohabitation rule, which eventually asked women claimants to be dependent on men or to give up friendship with people of the opposite sex. Claimant Union detected institutional sexism behind these practices by welfare officers. There were also transgender claimants, many of whom were considered unemployable by employers, but deemed not entitled to the benefit by welfare officers. These experiences of discrimination led claimants to advocate for the individuality, universality, and unconditionality of UBI. They had UBI in their four main demands in their charter, adopted in 1970, and insofar as can be verified by written documents, they kept it until 1987. While they called it a guaranteed adequate income or guaranteed minimum income, what they meant by these terms is clearly what we now call UBI. The internal document in 1972 clearly distinguished two different conceptions, which later UBI academics called a basic income and a make-up guaranteed income, arguing in favor of the former. Let me first look at the commonalities between Keynes and women in the CU and women's liberation movement. Change the current system of distribution, change the moral code behind it. For Keynes, these changes represent the due course of history in 100 years' time. For the women, the changes were to be actualized by their active intervention and the demand for UBI. For them, UBI was an important transitional demand. Its introduction was meant to change both the system and the moral code behind it. What are the major differences between Keynes and these women? First, Keynes took for granted existing ways to work to be naturally the same as socially necessary work. In contrast, claimant women did not. Rather, they also tried to redefine the meaning of work. Let me quote from their mouth. Quote, "In this society, we are brought up to believe that work and employment are the same thing. When people ask you, 'What do you do?' they mean, 'What is your job?' Social status is closely linked to occupational hierarchies. People without employment usually say they don't do anything, whereas, in fact, most people without jobs are busy working hard bringing up children, caring for sick relatives or neighbors, or simply digging the garden." End quote. They not only included unpaid work in socially necessary work, but they also excluded some of wage labor from this category. Let me quote again. "Most hard-working people in jobs are supposed to be contributing to the general welfare of society. But in fact, many people working against the interest of their friend and neighbor. In Britain, for instance, 2,000 million a year is spent on making weapons to kill people with. Other employees act as agents of social control." End quote. So they recognize what is counted as work is socially constructed, unlike Keynes. Second, while both of them despise the existing moral code,